Arrin Sutliff creates site-specific and time-based work using plants, flowers, and digital media. Based in DC, Arrin is the owner of Tint Floral, which focuses on design for weddings and events. Informed by the season, she relies on local growers and nurseries for blooms and foliage. Over to you, Arrin.
Hello, everyone. So nice to be back in the new year with some color, even though it's starting to look kind of drab outside. At least I know you are all joining from everywhere. So maybe you're in Florida and it's not drab at all. My sister moved to Hawaii, and I know it's not drab there because she's sending me insane photographs. But for here, it's in DC, which is where I'm presenting from right now, and the US Botanic Garden is. The outside is like kind of a little dusty at the moment, and so maybe your wreaths are kind of getting dusty and drab as well. So today we're going to focus on refreshing them, giving them some new life, even if they already look great and you still like the way they look. Sometimes just like touching things and adding something to them can kind of um, bring some positive energy to it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can do that. So this class is assuming that you already have a wreath that maybe you got from the grocery store, maybe you got from a florist, maybe you made it yourself. If you don't have one and this class inspires you to go make one, there are plenty of like full tutorials online, but I'll also kind of talk about how to make one. If you're just starting as well, you'll be able to apply a lot of these same techniques. So we'll go over that a little bit towards the end if you don't already have one. But if you do have one, I want to start by just pretending we all got the same wreath. Like December 15th comes along, we all go to Trader Joe's and we all buy like the same exact wreath. But now we're in mid-January, and maybe like some of our wreaths still look good and some of our wreaths are like kind of burnt to a crisp and things are falling off of them, but it's all the same material. So I want to talk a little bit about why that is, like why some people's wreaths last longer and look fresher for longer, but then other people's with the same material, they got it at the same place, they're the same exact florist made it, they all had juniper, they all had the same material. So why do some of them like look not so hot right now and other ones like look still really happy and fresh and alive? And generally it comes down to their location. So it's like, is it hot or is it cold? So back to the Florida thing, I actually taught a wreath class in Florida once, and the wreath that I made, like within a week, it was kind of on its way out because it's hot there. While it is humid, so that is helpful, a lot of the materials that I'm used to working with, when they are exposed to the heat outside, they like quickly would dry out and lose moisture. And while they still might look good, like this wreath that I have here, this wreath still looks good, but like if I touch it, it's pretty dry. It's pretty crinkly. So it looks good, but if this is hanging on a door and you're opening the door in and out, like stuff might be falling off of it, etc. So if it's hot, it's just gonna lose moisture and the wreath is just going to die quicker. If it's cold, on the other hand, like truly the winter, I mean, it's great, but this is obviously the time to make wreaths, because if it is always cold outside, it's just acting like a ginormous cooler, and anything will last longer in a cooler. So if you had your wreath outside versus inside, the wreath that's outside, I'm sure if it's cold outside, it's doing a lot better. So I have this example here. I have these berries. These are Ilex berries. These are all like, when I touch this, they're all just going to fall off. This is one of the wreaths that I'm going to be refreshing today. But you can see here, see how this one, these berries are like super plump and super nice, and they're still really alive, and these ones are all shriveled. They still look good, like it still has a lot of color, but they're definitely shriveled. I harvested these berries at the same exact time in December, and the only difference is that these ones were inside and these ones were outside. And so, and I didn't water them, I didn't spray them, I didn't do anything. The only difference was in and out, and you can just see what a difference this is. And so the ones that were outside in this like cooler essentially are doing a lot better. So even if you're in DC, we have had some warm days, so your wreath might not be so great in terms of the greens and stuff. If you're somewhere like Maine or Canada, your wreath is gonna be in much better shape. Another thing is it sunny or is it in indirect sun? So when I make wreaths for other people, sometimes I hang them on their front door, and it's a south facing window. And so in the winter, the sun is like sitting further in the southern hemisphere, so you might not even really get any sun on the north side of your home. So if your door is facing the south side and it's in direct sun, again, it's just going to be losing moisture and it's going to dry out much quicker, versus if it's on the north, if your front door is on the north side and it's not getting much light. So those are some things that kind of determine whether your wreath is going to last and look happy and healthy. Something that you can do to kind of prolong the life of the wreath, like let's say you just inherently, like your door is on the south side and it's kind of hot outside, it's like reaching above freezing temps or wherever you are, what you can do is you can spray it. So sometimes before I make a wreath, I'll even soak the greens, like I'll soak this juniper just in a bucket of water so it's super hydrated before I even start making it. And you can do the same thing with wreaths that are already made. You can either bring them inside and just spray them down in your sink, or I'm in the city, so I can't really do this, but in an ideal world, like this sounds really romantic to me, to like take my wreath and kind of put it in the grass overnight so it can kind of get the moisture and the dew, and so it can kind of get watered by the dew. I really love that idea, but I live surrounded by concrete, so it's not something I can really do. But yeah, watering your wreath regularly will keep that moisture in and make it last a lot longer. But you still might be coming up along this part where you're just like kind of bored with it. Like most flowers, when we have them in the house, they last about a week. That's it. And then they're starting to die. So it's this nice like refresh of color and whatnot. And then the wreaths, they just kind of might get stale after a while. So even if it kind of still looks good, you might want to add some things to just spruce it up. Especially some color, like citrus is a really good thing. Okay, one more thing about placement is indoor. So we talked about indoor and outdoor. So one thing you do want to keep in mind when it's outdoor, some things can't take a freeze. So if you are refreshing your wreath now and you want to add some flowers to it, or you want to add some things, like usually the best material to work with right now is material that's already outside, material that is able to withstand the cold. So evergreens, for example, berries, like dried grasses, you can use ribbons, like things that are going to be able to withstand the cold. If you get fancy and like you want to put some tulips in it, or you see something at the store with like some early spring blooms, you can put those in it if it's indoor. But if the temperature dips below freezing, those things are just going to freeze, and they'll just kind of, like, what happens when flowers freeze is when they freeze, it looks fine, but then the next day they kind of just like turn to mush. And so if it is an outdoor thing, you want to only be using things that are around you. But that's kind of the beauty of this season, is I just want to encourage you to use materials that you can just find around you. Elizabeth and I were just talking about how in DC this year, we got some pretty heavy snowstorms, especially we had one that was especially heavy, and basically all around right now, there are just fallen branches. And so you can use these fallen branches. That means you don't even have to cut anything like this. There's so many pine branches just down right now. I know Nikki, I think, is on this call right now. She mentioned that a magnolia tree had come down in her neighbor's yard, like some big branches from a magnolia tree. I have some magnolia here to work with today. So the beautiful thing about magnolia, it has these like, not every variety of magnolia has this, but a lot of them have these brown backs with these like glossy green fronts. So I really like working with these. You can find fallen pine cones. I do like to add some color just to liven it up. And because we don't really have fruit growing, at least in the Northeast right now, but citrus is really big. You can get different kinds of citrus, and citrus can be a really beautiful addition to wreaths. So I dried, um, I dried some of these last night. I will say I will debunk. I heard a woman say, this is all mine. I heard a woman say you can put your oven to the highest temperature, pop the orange slices in, and then just turn it off and turn your oven off. And then overnight, they'll dry out. So I tried that last night and they were not dry at all this morning. So I don't know, maybe she has like a very well insulated oven somehow, but I usually, the way that I dry these is just by putting my oven at the lowest temperature it'll go, which I think is 180, and then just leave it on for hours and they'll dry out. But these are a beautiful color. You can even use just full, you don't have to dry them. You can use full citrus, and I'll show you how to use full citrus in your wreaths. I have some of these red berries, this Ilex. Dried stuff is really nice, things that you maybe have saved from the summer. So this is troll grass, which I think is really fun. It adds a nice highlight. Because things are feeling kind of dark in the winter, it's nice to add just a few things that are kind of bright. I have this dried Italian ruscus. This is bleached, so this is not very natural. It's just something that I have left over from something else, but it provides that highlight, and so I might incorporate this as well. And let's see, what else do I have that I thought I had? Oh, tallow berries. I love these again for the highlight aspect. These are, I'll hold it under the camera. These are white tallow berries. These actually, I love these because they don't wrinkle up like the Ilex berries do. They look the same basically from the time that you get them to right now. They stay really plump and they don't actually squish. They're kind of like a hard berry. And so I really like using these to add a highlight as well. So really anything like as you're walking, I've seen some dogwood branches falling and they're not flowering yet, but they don't necessarily need to be flowering for you to use them. But yeah, broken off dogwood branches, anything that's evergreen will give it color and look really nice. Juniper, cedar, arborvitae, those are just some things that you might find on your way.
Arrin, one question about care. If you've got a wreath on a front door that is exposed to sunlight, but it's protected by a glass door in front of that, where does that fall on the spectrum of success?
Actually, like probably, I would say it probably will actually die a little bit quicker. And I'm purely speculating right now, but the reason I think it might die a little bit quicker is because it's not exposed to those like super cold temperatures. And the cold temperatures actually like act as that cooler. Like it might be insulated from moisture and cold temperatures, but it's still exposed to that sun. So it's almost like in a greenhouse, which is keeping it a little bit warmer. So it may dry out a little bit quicker. The nice thing about that is you can add things to that that might not do well if they were exposed to rain. Like these, I put these outside, but like over time, like orange slices, if they get rained on a bunch of times, they don't do that well because they're basically I'm drying them out and then they're getting moist again. So there is a plus to having that glass door, but I would maybe think about spritzing it a little bit more. The thing about spritzing is like I don't like to get my door wet or my wall wet or whatever, which is usually why I just take the whole thing off and just kind of like spray it in the sink if I am going to be watering it. Other times I just let it dry out and I'm happy with that. And then I come in and just add more later, which is what I'm going to kind of be teaching you to do today.
Speaking of using some of those fruits, is there ever an issue with it attracting wildlife, or how do you protect it from causing problems with wildlife?
So I haven't had that problem. I've actually had people who've had problems with berries where like the birds just want to eat their wreaths. I think it probably is just highly dependent on where you are. And if it's an issue, obviously, just if you notice that it's an issue where you see bugs on it or something, then don't use it. When you're drying out the fruit, or like when it has the leather outside, it really shouldn't be a problem. Like if I were putting orange slices without drying them, I feel like that might attract like gnats, stuff like that, because it's still sticky and they just seem to like that. But with dried stuff, I personally haven't had a problem with it. Even with dried, like sometimes I use cranberries. I haven't had a problem with cranberries. Yeah, the biggest thing that I've seen, which is funny, is the birds with the berries. Sometimes that's been an issue for me, but I kind of just am like, cool, you can have some berries. One more thing to think about, like this, to think about the care. I kind of think about, like, I used to be the type of person where I would go online and I'd be like, how many cups do I need to water my jade plant? Like I used to think it was that specific, where it's like I wanted someone to tell me like twice a week you need to give your jade plant a half a cup of water. And what I've learned through working with plants over time is that it really just depends on where it is. So if my jade plant is in direct sun and it's the summertime and there's a ton of airflow, maybe I'm watering it once a week. But if it's in the winter time, there's less light and there's less airflow, maybe I'm watering it once a month. So it really just depends on the environment.
Arrin, as you're talking about materials, you mentioned the magnolia leaves. Could you talk a little bit more about how you use those in wreath making and especially in wreath refreshing, especially since so many came down in this recent set of storms?
Yeah, so I'll use them in a couple different ways to show you in the demonstration part of class, but just so you can either, what I think would be like, let's say you have no tools at all. What I really like about magnolia, it has these like really thick, strong stems. So what's nice is you can kind of use them as like a skewer of sorts. So you can cut them on an angle. You can see that. I'm cutting it on an angle, and then you can actually just stick it in. And that's like the easiest thing. If you have a wreath and you just want to like add a little bit to it, I don't have to use wire or anything. I can just find a spot that already is kind of dense, where it's going to have this lattice where it's going to be able to take in things. And I'm basically creating a skewer with the stem, and I can just poke it in. And so I could do it this way, which I just showed you, or I could also turn it this way and have the green on the outside. But using that magnolia, I love the magnolia for that. Juniper, the juniper I have here is a little bit different. So these stems are just a little bit smaller. You can still use it in the same way, but because they're not like as sturdy, you just have to get closer to the material when you're using it like a skewer. So because the stem is a little bit thinner, I would want my fingers to be like pretty close down to the entry point so that the stem doesn't want to break when I'm putting it in. So I just have, but it still works the same way. But the thicker the stem, the nicer, that you don't have to worry about the stem breaking or anything. So I really love the magnolia in that. You can also, I've seen a lot of people use glue. I'm not a big hot glue gun person. I haven't incorporated hot glue into floristry for years. I actually just got a hot glue gun this year though, and I'm really excited about it. And I did plug it in. I don't know if I'm going to use it today, but for those of you that do have a hot glue gun, just adding a couple things with hot glue, really, it really does work if you have a good one with like a good enough temperature. So you could always add them to that as well. And for that, the nice thing is you can use the individual leaves. So if I just, like, I can't really do the skewer method with one leaf because, like I said, this isn't strong enough. So if I try to cut this on an angle and stick it in, it's just gonna wanna kind of bend and break. So I can either wire the individual leaf. I'll just show you an example of how I would do that. So, which is it's a little bit tedious. So I could wire the individual wreath. Let's see. So I would make the U first. And so I have this U, and then I brought it down to around my stem. And then I would usually use floral tape. You don't have, this could be a little bit excessive. To have it be nice and sturdy, I'm gonna take some floral tape. This is not really a class on how to use floral tape, so but I am using it here, so I'll just briefly say, if you do get floral tape and you realize it's not sticky, it's because you have to stretch it in order to use it. But now that I have this stem wired, I can either just stick it in like the skewer, or I can even just wrap it around a stem that already exists. And I could have made that even longer. Like, my wiring is pretty small here. I could have made it like a full long stem so I could really wrap it around. But that's one way that you can use magnolia with wire, with just a single leaf. A much easier way, potentially, just depends on your preference, like kind of what you like. Another way that you could do it is by just taking this. I'm kind of shocked at myself for setting up this hot glue gun today, but I'm glad I did. Just take some hot glue and put it on the leaf, and then I can just stick that in right there as well. And so for you, if you're doing a lot of this, it might just be way quicker to do the hot glue if you want to do that. I do think you have a little more, like the hot glue is, you don't have as much play. Like when you have something on a wire stem, you kind of, like if I made this stem longer, I could actually have the magnolia extend kind of out beyond the frame. So you do have a little more control when you are using wire. But the quick and dirty version of that is totally hot glue, which I'm coming around to. I want to talk a little bit about so assuming that you all have these wreaths that you want to refresh, I want to talk a little bit about frames that might be underneath these wreaths. So this is a frame, and you could also get inspired by this if you wanted to be starting one from fresh. This is like my favorite wreath frame, I think, and this is just made of copper pipe that is in the plumbing section at your hardware store, and you can kind of just, it comes in a tight coil, and you can kind of just open it up into a circle. I have a coupling here that you can see that I've attached the wire so it connects on the end, but you could also just use electrical tape or any sort of duct tape or something to kind of get that to stick together. And then when you're making the wreath, you just kind of cover that part up. So you don't actually have to have the coupling if you can't find the coupling. Sometimes they don't have them at the stores. This is one that I actually made, but it's really simple and something anyone could get at your hardware store. This is a little bit simpler in the fact that you can just go to Michael's or Joann's and it's already made for you, or order it online. And this is generally just called a floral hoop. Get this one out of the way so you can see the difference. So this one is much smaller. It's a much thinner material, but it still looks super nice with, like you can kind of do asymmetrical stuff when you have these metal frames. because you don't have to cover it all. Whereas when you have something like, I don't have one to show you, but you know those green wire frames, those just don't look great. So you really have to cover the entire circle in order for your wreath to be complete, because you really want to cover the mechanics. But when your frame is something that's like beautiful on its own, you can truly just take a couple stems, and you'd want to do more than this, and I'll show you. But just as like a quick, like if you just wire a couple things onto this and a couple pine cones and you add a couple berries at the bottom, like this could be something really nice and simple and sweet without having to have a ton of material. So that's another frame that might be underneath your wreath. This is another frame. So I'm gonna lift this up. So this is what the wreath looks like now. It has all of these red berries on them, but this is a wreath that I had in my house, and it wasn't on a door, so it's fine because I'm not losing all these berries, but it's time for me, like this is dried and it just doesn't look good anymore. And all the berries are falling when I move it. So I'm actually gonna just take all of them off. I'm going to show you before I put them off. So with some refreshing, you can just add. Like with this one, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add to it. I'm just going to add some things to kind of give it a little color. I might take out some stems that kind of have looked brown or might be too crispy for my liking. But for this one, because I have berries falling off and it's just like making me sad, I'm actually going to remove the entire piece that had the berries on it. So I think I'll leave my tinsel. This was kind of just like, it felt extra festive to me. I needed some extra cheer this year, so I added tinsel to the side of it, which I normally don't do, but you can see the back. So this is a straw wreath. And the nice thing about the straw is you don't actually need to wire anything on. It's kind of, it kind of already has the structure where you can just stick things into it. So what I normally do with these types of wreaths is I layer. So I'll put it down so you can see here. So I'll just kind of, I'm going to start with Juniper, and I just have a bunch of little pieces of Juniper. And I can do all one material like I had with the berries, but I'm going to mix it up a little bit. But you see how easy this is? It's like literally I'm poking this in, and this is the same for grapevine wreaths. So it's the same. This is a grapevine wreath. You can see the back. You can generally, if it's thick enough, you can poke stuff into grapevine wreaths as well. You might have to wire a base on to make it a little more full so that stuff sticks in it a little bit more if the grapevine wreath is too thin. Does anyone have a wreath? Does anyone have like a wreath that I failed to mention? You have a frame that is one that I didn't mention that you're confused of how you might approach adding to it, or do you want me to touch upon?
Arrin, a few folks have mentioned grapevine wreaths, so if you could just talk a little bit more about refreshing those, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. So with grapevine, you have two options. So you can either just add to them, kind of like this one that I'm going to just add to. So with everyone, it's kind of the same thing. With grapevine and the straw, it's just a little bit easier because you can actually poke the material into it and you truly need no wire. So that's what I love about these frames. And so with grapevine, if you want to just leave what you already have, you can. And then you just kind of add to it. So here, I'll focus on this one a little bit just so you can see what I mean. So this one, I've taken off a lot of things that I don't like already. This pine is actually fine. This arborvitae's okay. Same with this. This is a little bit too crispy for me. So what I would probably do is I'm not even going to pull it out. I'm just going to clip it out. And the reason I'm going to clip it out is because then it still leaves that base of these like interlocked stems, so I can stick things in it easier. So instead of like going ahead and pulling everything out, unless you want to really redo the whole wreath, which is totally fine and I think fun to do, if you just want to refresh, what I would do is normally cut out the things that are just kind of bothering me. The things that just feel stale and feel dry. Like these are dry, this is dried wheat. And while it's like nothing's wrong with it, it was dry when it went in, it's just kind of feels stale to me. So I'm taking the things out that I'm just kind of bored with. And that are either extra crispy or just aren't really making me happy anymore. So I'm just kind of cutting out those things like these. I think this is blue ice cedar. I think that's what it's called. It's like, it's just too crispy. And I know it's going to start falling when I open and shut the door. So I'm going to take those off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add to it. And so I have this big piece of juniper down here. And I'm going to make those like skewers, like I was talking about with the magnolia. So I like to break down my pieces anywhere from like 4 to 12 inches, honestly, because sometimes it's nice to have things kind of branch out to the side. So you don't, but it is nice to, instead of me like cutting one, putting it on, cutting one, putting it on, I don't like the workflow of that. It's like, it makes me not enjoy wreath making. So what I normally do is I start by breaking down the material first. So I'm kind of cutting off all of these pieces that I want to use. Just as a note, if you have a piece like this and it has a blunt end and it just doesn't look so great, if you just come down and cut it on an angle, you can use those blunt pieces. So that kind of took that away. And now it looks like a full piece again. So if you ever have a blunt end, just go find the stem that's closest to, like this one, for example. Here, let me show you, because this is something I see a lot of people think that they can only use the ends of the branches because they're really nice and fluffy. And they shy away from using the center of the branches because they have these blunt ends. So just let me show you exactly what I mean by that. So I have this juniper here that I want to break down. What I would do is I would come in and I would cut it here on an angle. Instead of cutting it, if I cut it like this, it just has this like really blunt end and it doesn't look so great. But if I find the branch, the first branch, I can come to that branch and cut down on an angle, and then it just looks a lot more fluid, and I can use this in my wreath instead of just getting rid of it and only using the ends. So for this grapevine wreath, I'm just going to come in and I've cut these. I'm going to cut, if I have that blunt, it's not going to go in. It really needs to be you're creating these little spears. So I've cut this on a steep angle, and I'm just going to add it into spots that are already kind of full. Ugh. Pretty thick one. So again, taking juniper, cutting it as a spear, coming in and just finding a spot and just kind of refreshing it, making it a little like bringing all this juniper smells amazing. It's super fresh. I can squeeze it. I can do anything with it. It's not going to break down on me because it's really fresh. It's not going to be flaky or fall apart. So I'm just kind of starting this wreath off with adding some fresh material to it. This is a dark green. I will want to add some highlights.
Arrin, I notice as you're working, you're pretty forceful handling your wreath and your materials. For someone who's not as familiar, can you talk just a little bit about that balance of delicacy with these older dried materials, but also, you know, you're working to do the refresh?
Definitely. So it is different when you're sticking these materials in, like they're getting into these like tight spots. And so you are going to have to be a little bit forceful. And that's why the dried stuff, I'm just kind of taking that off from the start because like I'm not interested in all of the dried stuff. This is always hard to display because it starts to get really messy. And then, yeah, I'm not super interested in that dried stuff staying on because I'm trying to make it like alive again. So, but what I normally do is like when I'm adding those things in, I'm holding the base. So I'm holding back here when I'm sticking it in. I'm not really holding the plant material. I'm holding the back base so that I'm not crushing any material that's already there. I mean, some stuff will fall off if they're old berries, if it's stuff that like if it's old evergreens that's kind of flaking off, and that's fine because you kind of want that stuff to come off anyway, but I'm not deliberately squeezing that place. Like I'm firmly gripping the back of the frame, kind of right where I'm entering it in, so that I can push off of something. And the same goes with the magnolia. So I come in on this magnolia, I'll take off, this piece is just kind of not that, I don't mind the holes, like I like things that look natural, but I don't love that piece. So I came in, I created my skewer, and then I'm holding the back really firm. And adding a little bit of, even the brown acts as a highlight. Like I don't generally like everything to just be green, especially when we're in the new year. Like I just feel like things need to brighten up a little bit. And that's the beauty of the magnolia, is that it like has that back color, so it can serve as like a brightener in a sense. But yeah, that's a good question, Elizabeth. It's one of those things that I don't realize I'm doing, but I am like holding the back kind of right where I'm putting it in. Also think about the direction. So the directionality of things I'm putting in isn't opposite of the way the wreath is already going. Like see how this kind of flows? Like if I put this here, it kind of flows with the direction of the wreath. If I go and I put this the opposite way, it's just gonna feel disjointed. So pay attention to the way the wreath was originally created, and when you're adding to it, you're kind of adding in that rhythmic motion and in that same direction, even though you're just adding a couple pieces and not needing to wire the whole thing. So this little piece came off when I was sticking it in. This side piece, this stuck around, but this side piece came off. And because it's not long enough for me to make a spear, like one of the spears or skewers, and stick it in, I will either have to, if I want to utilize this piece, I'll do what I showed you before. I'll either I'll do the wiring example again, just so that you can see, because hot glue is pretty straightforward. Like I can take a dab of hot glue and I can stick it on, easy. So I won't demo that, but if I needed to add a wire to this, this is what I would do. I have this straight wire that I'm using. Let's see here. It's the same as spool wire. So if you've ever taken any of my classes, like, you know, I generally tell you to get the spool wire because it's straight wire if you just pull it out and cut it. The reason I have a bunch of cut straight wire, I buy packs of straight wire like this, is because I'm doing this all the time. So it's just easier for me to have cut pieces as well. But if I were to choose just one or the other, I would always choose the spool because the spool allows me to have it on the spool and do the full wreath as a whole, or it allows me to cut pieces off. So the spool is definitely what I would get if you're only getting one. This is called the crank method for wiring. So the way I would wire this, I showed you how to do the U method with the leaf, where we stuck the U in, brought it down to the stem, and then did floral wire. The crank method, I'm cranking it. So I'm putting it here, and then I'm cranking it around the stem. And then I move the wire so that both wires are pointed down. And then again, I'll come in with floral tape because it makes it sturdier. The hot glue works perfectly fine. I just want to give you other, or even floral glue would work as well. I don't know about like basic Elmer's glue just because I don't use it. If anyone has, let us know in the comments so that we can all learn from your experience. But so here's my long piece now, and now I can go ahead and just wire this in. I'm just going to kind of wrap it around. But the point I really want to get across is you really don't need any tools. So I am using wire here and there, but that's because like I had a short piece or I just had a leaf. But truly, like if you just do the spear and stick method, you could really get by with just getting most plant material outside and finding those sturdy branches, just taking the ones out that you don't love by cutting them. You can pull them out, but you don't want to fully dislodge your base because it's nice to have this something for the spears to stick into. But yeah, the wiring is like an added bonus. The way I would wire a pine cone on, again, you could just do the hot glue, dab, hot glue. The way that I would wire this on, and when I say wire, you can also be using twine for especially things like this, or fishing line. Use what you have. You don't have to have the exact tools that I have. The way that I would wire this is I would take a piece of wire and I kind of just put it in the scales because you want to kind of hide the wire. You could do the same with twine. I'm twisting it in the back, and then I'm gonna wire that on and just twist it off on the back side. I have another one here. So again, so this is grapevine, but if this were any of these wreaths, if this were even done on this, if this were done on the straw, if this were done on the green wire frame, you can use the addition method to any of these. Just cut out what you don't like that's already on, and maybe that's a lot. And that's fine. Like maybe you're just over so much of what's on the wreath. Just cut it out. And then just kind of add stuff. Use the lattice that your original wreath has kind of already created for you. I don't love that there. Yeah, I like that better.
Arrin, as we're learning about how to wire full-size pieces on, the audience wants to know, how will you wire on that whole orange? Or if not wire, how will you attach that whole orange? So if
Okay, yeah.
that'd be
So,
amazing.
okay, truth be told, I ordered clementines for this and I got full oranges. So that I was not planning on having this full orange, but the same method works. I've actually discovered this kind of recently and it's been really useful. So I used to take what I used to do, and this will work for lighter stuff. You can just take one skewer, skewer it. Oops, you wouldn't go all the way through. Skewer it, and then you can kind of stick it in. Okay. Obviously, like I said, this was supposed to be a clementine, a little daintier, not this entire big orange. Another thing you can do is put a dab of hot glue or floral glue or Mod Podge first, and then pierce right where that dab of glue is. And then that will make sure if it is upside down, it won't slip out. Normally the way that you would just orient it, you would orient it in a way that it was like upright. Like if you were using this orange in an arrangement, you would orient it in a way that it was upright, not that it was upside down, because it would slip out. But if you want to prevent slippage altogether, you can do the dab of glue method. Another thing that I really like doing that is really, really sturdy is taking 4 skewers. And I learned this from a woman who incorporates citrus into so many things. And I just think it's it feels so sturdy. It's amazing. I absolutely love this method. Skewer, 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 skewer. And then all these 4 come together and use any type of tape. Here I use floral tape because it's what I had next to me. You can use duct tape. The woman who I learned this from, she uses packing tape, which I just don't think that I'm very good at using packing tape. Like I can't even package packages well with packing tape. So that definitely would not be my go-to. You can of course use this kind of floral tape, which is sticky, different from stem tape. But any type of tape that you have, and then you bring these together, and then you would have to find a spot. So I would probably, what I would do to put this in, I don't want this to be out here, a big forefront. Just honestly, that doesn't look that bad. It's okay. It's a little much for me, honestly. If it were the clementine, I would probably leave this. But it's just it just feels I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think I'm open to, should I tuck it and have it be kind of some hidden color, or do you like it full frontal, orange definitely is here to stay? Which one do we like better? Okay, I'm gonna tuck it. So the way that I would put this in, this is kind of giving me a hint of color without it drawing my eye. It's kind of oh, there's some color there, a suggestion of color, instead of me being forced to stare at the orange.
Arrin, your gut is matching our attendees. Lots of thumbs up and smiley faces, and
Okay.
on average, we're hearing that they like it tucked.
Okay, great. So the way that I would do this then is I'm just going to take wire around. I'll actually, just because this is very heavy, what I'm going to do first, and this is how I start wreaths too. If I'm ever going to start a wreath by wiring it, it's just way easier to start with the wire already attached, opposed to trying to hold the thing that you're wiring. If I'm trying to hold this heavy thing while also trying to attach my wire to the frame, it's just kind of doing way more things than my hand needs. see if this was up a little bit further. I have to play around with the placement a little bit. Where was it? I really liked where it was. Okay, there we go. I'm just gonna wrap around, pulling it tight, always keeping my my spool nearby, not letting my wire get too far away. This is why I like the spool and not just the straight wire, because it's just, the spool is way more versatile. And then when I'm finished, when it feels secure, I will come to the back, I'll cut it off, and I'll just weave it through a couple pieces in the back that feel secure. There's no really rhyme or reason to this. But there we go. And I love that, actually. And you see a little of my skewers here, but what I'll do is I'll come in with my spear method. I cut this on an angle, and I'll come and I'll just put this right over those skewers, so it covers it up, but we still have this like nice little hint of orange. If I wanted to add some slices, I probably wouldn't add slices and whole in the same piece. I'd probably go for one or the other, but just so you know how to do it, if I were to add some, it's not a very particularly beautiful one. I like these a little bit better. If I were to add some slices, I generally like to cluster them a little bit, and you can either you can glue it on, or again, you can come in with wire. You can get anything on with a little bit of wire. So the way I would do it with wire is I would do the U. So you do see a little bit, but not really. You see a little bit of green, but you're just not going to see that when you're looking at the wreath as a whole. And I would come in and just gently wire that on, spinning it around the back. But hot glue or any glue will work in this scenario as well. Yeah, and I probably would cluster, just because I think that looks nice. I'll use hot glue just for the sake of speed for this one.
Arrin, as we're wrapping up, we have one more question about a different kind of wreath base, which is somebody who has the straw base, and they're asking if you took the plastic off of it, or did it come without plastic? So if you have plastic on the straw bases, how do you approach that?
So I actually made my straw base. It was a grapevine. I'm going to move this off. It was a grapevine frame, and then I took handfuls of straw and wrapped it with twine. And so mine did not come with plastic. If I were to buy one that came with plastic, I've never bought one, so I don't know if the plastic is serving a functional purpose. So if the plastic is serving a functional purpose, like it's keeping the straw on, then you wouldn't want to take it off. But if you can see clearly that the straw is being held on with twine or wire or whatever they might be holding it on with, then you can go ahead and certainly remove the plastic. And I definitely would remove the plastic if it seems like structurally it would still be sound.
And a sourcing question for sourcing the Ilex berries, is that something you are foraging for, or is that something you're purchasing?
It depends on if I can find it. Like sometimes you'll find it, you can forage for it, but a lot of local farmers, like for me, Woolham Gardens has Ilex berries. They have the orange and the red. You can usually get them from your local floral wholesaler. But sometimes sometimes you score and you can find them as well. It's Ilex verticulata is the type, and I absolutely love them. You see how easy this is in the straw? The straw is just it's very simple, and I've actually, you saw me, I took all the berries out of that. Really quick before we wrap up, Elizabeth, I just want to, if you have not made a wreath and you're like, oh well, I don't even have a wreath to refresh, start, and we're not going to really get into this fully, but I just want to say to start with wiring your frame so that you have it stuck onto your frame, and then you're just kind of adding pieces and you're continuing to layer down. So you're adding a piece and you're adding another piece, and let's see, and you're adding another piece, and you can do bigger bundles as well. But just a really quick intro, if you're brand new and you don't have a grapevine or a straw wreath and sticking in isn't an option, this is how you would wire on a blank frame. I think that's it for me. Do you have any more pressing questions? If not, thank you so much everyone for attending. I hope you got some inspiration to kind of liven up what's already in your home.
Thank you so much, Arrin, for sharing these lovely, refreshing strategies with us. And thank you to the audience for joining. Your great questions and your presence are really wonderful and appreciated.